Game Changers. This is our 4th annual Game Changers, where we invite women from the industry to come and talk to our students and the public. This time, we have a great set of panelists who are going to introduce themselves. And we're going to run the panel until 8 p.m. I know that the flyer said Q&A, but the Q&A is going to happen sort of informally during the reception afterwards. So if you have like burning questions to ask them, they'll be outside and you can get like one-on-one talk to them. So I think that works out much better, and we get to actually listen to them talk about important issues much longer. So I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I'm going to shoot to Lauren Brown, who is our moderator. She's from EA Mobile, and take it away.
All right, hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our panel, and thank you to Moore for allowing us to be here and speak about these important issues. So to begin, let me introduce my wonderful panelists. So let's start with Rachel.
Awesome. My name is Rachel Sima. I am an associate producer at PHL Collective, which is a game studio based here in Philadelphia. I am really active in the Philadelphia game community. I help run Philly Game Mechanics, which some of you may have been to before. We do meetups bi-weekly, and then I also am on the board of the Philadelphia chapter of the International Game Developers Association.
Hi, my name is Zoe Smith. I am currently a 3D character artist over at QC Games in Austin, Texas. We're working on like a kind of co-op versus multiplayer 4v1 action RPG called Breach, which we just announced at Gamescom. Before that, I was working as a contract character artist over on SWTOR at BioWare. And then even before that, I was a student at Laguna College of Art and Design. So I'm not that far from where you guys are now. So yeah, that's me.
Hi, my name is Shayla Hall, and I currently work at Floyd County. They're the people who did C-Lab 2021, Frisky Dingo, and currently Archer. I am a background director and sometimes, design. I've graduated from the Art Institute of Atlanta with a bachelor's degree in media arts and animation. Yeah, pretty much that's it.
All right, perfect. So I wanted to start off by asking y'all, what got you inspired to want to get into the games or animation industry in the first place? And anybody could take it away.
I'll go first. All right. So I'm the youngest of all of my siblings by a lot. So I inherited a lot of older gaming paraphernalia, and so I got really into that as a kid, and it was really cool. That was something I did with my sister a lot. She's 10 years older than me, so it was something we could kind of share. So that kind of started my interest in games and playing video games. And it didn't really occur to me that it was a real job that I could have until much later. But yeah, I mean, definitely once I found out it was a job, I was like, yeah.
What got me into animation industry wasn't until I think when Ren and Stimpy premiered on Nickelodeon, and my dad taught me how to animate using a notebook pages. And ever since then, I really wanted to pursue it. I was also interested in game art design. I would always try to emulate or try to make my own character sheets for them. But I went ahead and pursued animation and graduated with a bachelor's. And surprising enough, I don't animate, I paint. Which is fine, it's something that I learned that I love even more. And yeah, that's where I am.
So I remember being a little kid, about 5 years old maybe, watching my dad play Doom, which is probably not something that a parent should play for a 5-year-old kid. But that's the real first moment I have of being introduced to video games and just kind of art in general. So I've always loved to draw. As a kid, I was always in art classes, painting classes, taking ceramics. So I did that all throughout school, got into AP art in high school. And I decided art was something that I wanted to do as a career, but I wasn't entirely sure specifically what I wanted to do until maybe high school, because games and art in general for me have always been some kind of form of escapism. And I find that like making up stories, making up characters is really comforting to me. And so in high school, I got really into playing video games and realized that, oh, this could be a legitimate career path that I go down. And so I put all my focus into applying for different schools that offered a game art program and put all my skills into 3D and 2D kind of art, specifically characters and character designs. And so that's how I became a character artist.
So what was the process of getting actually into the industry when you first got into the industry? How did you go about that individually?
I would start with I happened to have graduated during the recession, so I didn't immediately get into the field then. But I wouldn't just be discouraged if that happens. But what's good is to network with people, and I have a friend who was already working at Floyd, and she helped me get a test, and they had me work that and hired me on the spot. So it's not always going to be that way, but it's really good to know somebody to give them a word of mouth. A lot of people do email their portfolios. That does help as well, but you gotta, really stay consistent with it. That's pretty much how I got to where I am, through networking, knowing people. I ended up knowing like half the studio when I got there, which was like a plus. So, but yeah, that's pretty much how I got in the doors. So.
For myself, my senior year of college, in addition to just working really hard and trying to get really good at self-study and finishing all my classwork, a lot of the seniors were encouraged to go to the GDC in San Francisco, the Game Developers Conference, if you're unfamiliar with it. At the time, I was already applying for jobs at various studios, one of them BioWare in Austin. And so by the time that they responded to me was about a week out from GDC. And so I asked if I could possibly postpone the art test because I was going to be away from my computer and I wouldn't be able to work on it for a whole week. And so the recruiter actually came back to me and said, oh, well, I myself I'm going to GDC. Would you like me to bring along the character lead for the job that you're going to be testing for? And so I was like, yes, absolutely. I want to meet this person. I want to get a portfolio review from them if they haven't seen my work. I just want to talk to them, see what they're like. And I did. And I turned in that art test. It wasn't very good. But I got the job anyway because I feel like meeting the person, having this person put a face to my name and to my work was a huge step in me getting my foot in the door into the industry.
Yeah, so I realized pretty early that video games were something that I really wanted to pursue, and I was just going to go for it. So I had a friend who was a concept artist who worked on some indie games, and one of the games needed a writer, and he suggested me. So I took the job, and that led to just a group of different writing jobs. And I found that there was a studio nearby, which I was really lucky. That's not like a typical thing that happens. But I went in with a resume, and I was like, I really want to intern here for the summer. Would that be something you'd be open to? And I was still in high school at the time, and they agreed. They took me on, and I moved up there from an intern. And then by the end, when I would have been a freshman in college, to the project manager. And I did start going to school. I went to Drexel and their computer science with a focus in game programming, but it didn't feel right for me. And as I explored it more, I left Drexel and I realized that production was kind of the avenue that I wanted to go. So I also went to GDC. I met some producers. I talked to them about their job, and they were like, yeah, I love spreadsheets and I love telling people what to do. And I was like, oh my God, me too. So yeah, I just got really involved in the community. I started networking, taking pretty much every opportunity that I could. And yeah, working is really what prepared me for getting a job. I got an interview at the studio I work at now, PHL Collective. And I think just having the experience that I did was what got me my position there.
Awesome. So what does a day in your job look like? Like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? How does that look?
Lots of coffee.
Yeah, there is coffee everywhere. So usually people, we usually have a set time, but just never really strict as long as you do your hours and get things done. What I've heard, because I'm always on the screen just working, so I don't really pay attention too much about it. But a lot of us are just we go straight to work and just continue on. We do have some activities outside of work sometimes, but other than that, I mean, you just work.
Well, what does that work look like?
Just headphones is silent, and yeah. It sounds exciting, but
Zoe.
So my work day is usually I get in at 10 a.m. because traffic is awful going south on the 183. So I get in at 10, get a cup of coffee, and then usually I'll open ZBrush and work on whatever task I'm assigned, be it fixing something, creating something new. I don't know if I can go into a ton of detail about everything. But usually it's very artistically focused, and it's something that I feel that my school prepared me for, in that I learned how to get into a rhythm with the pipeline that we're working in, and I know how to make something that looks good within that pipeline and make something game ready, which I think is very important as a character artist.
Yeah. Yeah, my job differs day to day completely. If you aren't familiar with what a producer does, which obviously I wasn't before I met some, it's a lot of organizational work. So the three main things that I think I would say a producer does is organize, facilitate, and inspire. So my job might be scheduling out an entire game, or it really depends on the day. So it could be talking to people about what they have to get done every day, or if you have a conflict or you need to reschedule something, if you need to communicate with the client, those are the kinds of things that I do. It's a little bit of everything, definitely. And I think this job in particular has been really crazy because I manage a lot of different projects that are very different. Everything, we just put out a game with Cartoon Network, a VR game where you play, if you've ever seen the show We Bare Bears, we did a food truck game where you play as the bears, which was crazy. That was a great game. And I did voice acting for that. It was crazy. And I wrote some text for that, and everything over to I manage mobile game projects where I'm helping with live ops development, just a crazy breadth of things. So yeah, I really have to be ready for whatever gets thrown at me every day. Yeah.
I guess I'll add to that. It does have times where it gets hectic. You'll have slow days and everyone's chill, and then the next day will be completely crazy. But you have to be ready for that. I just felt like I needed to add that.
Yeah. And I would say if I'm doing my job correctly, everybody else's jobs are like very normal. And I'm like running around like a chicken with my head cut off. It's great. That's good though.
Okay, so speaking of those crazy days, actually, what is what is your experience with crunch and overtime? Have you had to experience a lot of that in your respective studios, or have you had not that much of it? How's that gone for you generally?
In the past, we did have to do a little bit of crunch time. It's usually when we're about to wrap up the season. And usually after that, there's a little bit of a hiatus, which typically lasts for like a month until a new script is ready. And then we start bringing in people in departments at a time. But usually when we do have overtime, it really doesn't last too long. We usually just work up to like 80, not 80. Yeah, that's typical. No, we usually like just I can't get the words out. But it rarely happens now that we've gotten things a little bit more organized and a better pipeline. People shifted around. It's something that changes over time. People, as the studio grows, things come more easier. But there are days or times where it's out of our control, and there would be like a script that's late from someone else outside. It happens, and you always have to be prepared for that. So the workload could, just pile up, but so far everything's been in control, and rarely do we come in on the weekends. But for me as a background director, sometimes I just choose to come in on the weekends or stay late, just to make things organized, because things can like build up for you really quickly. But other than that, I haven't had any horrible experiences when we have crunch times. So
yeah, our studio doesn't do a lot of crunch. Like I think a couple times we have like a really big project and it's like the final polish week, but it's not bad. And I think for me, if I'm doing my job well, like scheduling in a realistic manner, that won't happen as much. So yeah, I haven't experienced that much in the studios that I've worked for, but I've definitely seen people who are my friends and they like get totally burn out just working like 80-hour weeks for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Over at EA, when I was working as a contractor on SWOTOR, contractors weren't really allowed to go over a certain number of overtime hours per week. I think during the holiday season when we weren't able to work as much because of like the company holidays where we weren't allowed to come in, they upped our overtime to about 50 hours a week. So that's kind of the most crunch I guess I've ever experienced. On the other hand though, I have heard of, I think some of the other studios we're all familiar with, some of the infamous ones where it's like 80 hours a week of crunch. Yeah, that doesn't happen at every studio. It's very studio specific, I think. Over at QC, I've never had to pull an 80-hour week. So, yeah, that's my experience.
All right, awesome. All right, so let's shift a little bit I'm curious about what your experiences have been in the industry as women specifically. Have been. Who wants to speak to that first?
Let me gather my thoughts.
I know it's a loaded question, but.
Do you have any kind of specifics that you're looking for?
So, have you faced any discrimination or pushback or any like negative or positive experiences as a woman in the industry?
I can speak a little bit. I think early on I had a lot of really good woman mentors, and I got to see what it was like to work with people who were willing to listen to you, even the men that I worked with. The first studio that I worked at, Island Officials, I felt really supported. and like I was really heard when I talked. And I think having that experience really early on made it so that later down the line, when I had experiences where I wasn't being listened to, where people weren't taking me seriously because of my gender or my age, I knew it. And so it was easy to not fall prey to second guessing whether it was just all in my head. So I guess that's been positive for me. But I definitely have experienced things that I don't think were intentionally malicious. I haven't had people who specifically targeted me because I was a woman, at least not to my knowledge, but definitely people who just aren't educated or just aren't aware or haven't really cared to make themselves sensitive to what they're saying or the way they're saying it or how they're talking over you. And as a producer, I think it can be, as a young woman producer, I think working primarily in all my roles that I've done as a producer with older men can be a little weird just because they don't often want to take direction from you and they don't always see you as an authority figure. So that can be kind of tough. I've experienced that.
I would say most of my experiences have been from like things I've seen outside, where you'll get the feeling where you feel like you're not getting heard. It ends up becoming a little bit of a mind game for yourself because of how there has been some toxic situations in the industry. So far, I've only really became background director pretty recently, so I haven't really needed to take too much of a position to speak over others. I have trying to get my words here.
You got this.
Yeah. Really, honestly, people would probably expect me not to do a certain thing that would cater to men. But I always find it as a challenge and rewarding when I end up proving them wrong. But I haven't really had anything really directed. I've been talking over to, but I don't really think it was on purpose. Or just, yeah, that's all I have.
So for my experience as a woman in the games industry, overall I felt like everything's been really positive. I haven't worked at a studio where I've felt unheard or like my supervisors or the art directors they've always listened to me. They've always taken into account my perspective and my thoughts when I'm creating something. And so I haven't had to deal with a lot of the challenges that we keep hearing that women face. So I consider myself incredibly lucky and incredibly thankful to both the studios that I've worked at. So, yeah.
All right, cool. In terms of the industry itself, statistics have shown that half of women, or like half the consumer base of like video games and animation, typically tend to be women, and those numbers are generally not reflected in the industry. Why do you think that is?
I think maybe a lot of women are interested in doing those things, but the path to get to them is not quite as clear. They're not given the same opportunities. And I think even though the consumers, like the female consumers are there, I think it's not quite as accepted. They can feel harassment, especially in the game industry. It's not as welcoming to women if you're playing like a multiplayer game or you're trying to get involved in a community of people who play a certain game. So you might not feel quite as empowered to go into that industry. And I think speaking on top of that, like once you're there, if you aren't lucky, like some of us have been, where you're in places where you feel supported and heard, you're not going to want to stay. I know this is pretty similar to like the tech industry, loses a lot of women every year. It's just, some people don't feel like it's worth it. And if you're in a bad studio or you're in a bad environment, like for sure, there's no reason to stay in that case, yeah.
Yeah, I feel that there is a certain amount of gatekeeping, especially in the like gamer kind of culture. Like, I don't know, I myself have found that like when I'm speaking to someone about like my passion for video games, not necessarily like in the like game making industry, but just in general, I'm met with a lot more skepticism, like, oh, like, what does this character do? Like, why is this your favorite character, kind of thing? And I have to kind of justify that, yes, I have played this game. I am familiar with the series. I probably know more than you. And I feel like that kind of translates to like a lot of women feel that maybe the game making industry is just as volatile as the gamer industry, which it isn't. I've found that the gamer community is a lot more vocal about certain things that the game making industry is not. So that might be another reason.
Even though I'm not, I don't do any game designs or in the industry at all. In animation, I feel like it's a little bit of a wider demographic than the gaming community, to where I like today I still see more women having their voices heard, getting involved, creating new shows, etc. So with that, I do think it's getting improvement, slow but surely it's going to get there. So honestly, I don't see too much of women not getting heard in animation. So.
Yeah, and I think speaking to what you had said about like having to prove that you're like a real gamer or whatever, like there are studios that I've heard of. Like I know I've heard like rumors of like Riot has like a culture where if you are not like a real gamer, you can't work here. And like who decides that, right? Like how the people in charge of making those decisions, like everyone has implicit biases. So when they look at someone and they're like, real gamer or no? Like, of course those are going to come into play. So I think, yeah, like you might not be hiring women because you just don't think they fit the box of who you like want at your studio. So
yeah, what do you think companies could be doing to actually fight those implicit biases and like, and actually make it a more welcoming environment for women?
I think like a good first step is saying that they want to be welcoming to women. I think that was something that appealed to me about where I work now. I think they'd be fine with me saying this, but before my roommate and I, we both worked there. Before we started working there were no women who worked there, which was, I think they were about 10 or 12 at that point. So I think even though maybe they didn't say it in these exact words, they kind of admitted that they weren't exactly sure how to support women who worked there, and they were willing to take feedback on what they could do to be better. But this is kind of a weird example, but I'm going to give it anyway. But the first day I walked into the studio, they had just moved offices, like literally at the same time that I was hired. And I walked into the bathroom and there was a trash can in it. And I was like, wow. That was like just such a small thing that like, it's like sounds so silly, right? But like if it was all men who had worked there, I don't know if that would have, like they might not have thought of that, right?
No, a lot of people don't think about that.
Right, but like that's a real problem. Yeah, and it had a lid. I was like, oh, yes.
We have so many bathroom stories.
Yeah. But it's just like really small things like that I think, that's like a very specific example, but like doing the work and thinking about like what do we need to be a place where a woman isn't going to have to ask you to put a trash can in the bathroom,
I think building on that, another way that like companies can show that they are thinking about women and like even people who identify of like different genders, sexual identities, different people of color. I think a good way for studios to get that message out that they are welcoming of diversity is to have that reflected in the media that they produce. So, like, I don't know, don't have your main protagonist just be like the kind of everyman straight white dude with a beard. Like, allow for players to have different options, or like, don't make them play as the standard, basically. Just have representation of different groups. And I think that's really important. And I do think that more studios are moving towards that, but we can always do better.
Yeah, the same thing can be applied to animation. If you want to bring more diversity to the industry, definitely show it. Produce it, put it out there and encourage like people that aren't, typical of what you see in the industry to, give it their chance. And yeah, basically they said what I was going to say.
And so with that being said, have you noticed there's been a shift since you've been in the industry about how the industry regards women and actually, produces the content that might cater better to women? Has there been a shift since you've been in the industry?
I would definitely say so. I've been seeing it not just in animation, I've been seeing it in games and film. It might not be all immediately, but I feel like the gradual changes that we are seeing now is something that will help to stick. Even inside the studio, or as far as designs, when we do character designs, we usually talk to everyone else in the studio to see what their opinion is. If something is might be a little bit too offensive or uncomfortable, we usually talk to each other about that. So I mean, there might be in several changes in designs or topics, but I mean, the whole experience is, I think, a good thing. So I've been seeing more and more women and other groups creating content. So I've been seeing,
Yeah, I definitely agree that there is a shift towards more content for more people, I guess, is how I would phrase that. Just an example of something that happened to me personally. When I graduated in 2017 from a game art major in California, about the ratio of male to female was about 40 to 60 in favor of women, which I think was a really cool thing to witness. Hey, more than half my graduating class is ladies. That's awesome. And I think that we are moving towards more diversity and equality in numbers. And I think that is definitely being reflected in some of the content that we're seeing today. The new Assassin's Creed, you can play as Cassandra. She's great. Love that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as the consumer base or consumer products become less about targeting a singular group of this is what a gamer is, and becomes a little bit more representative of the kinds of people who play it, studios have to take it more seriously. So for example, a lot of the people that I work with, they have never really played mobile games, but now we make mobile games, and that's a big part of our client base. And they're slowly kind of realizing this is something that we need to take seriously. It's legitimate. It's a real form of media. And, traditionally mobile games have been more marketed to and played by women, especially older women, which is really cool. And I think that's the kind of thing that will help get women interested in, or make women feel like they can come into this space. And when they say oh, I really like playing this mobile game, people aren't gonna laugh at them,
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go.
Before you go, I also think the consumers help a bit with that too, with encouraging each other to, hey, check out this, this game that I think you would relate to as well. So I would definitely say outside parties that push themselves to go out and support it also helps show that if you do take a risk, sometimes you will get what you want. So yeah,
definitely. In terms of that, actually, I know you said you talk amongst yourselves at work about a product that you're working on. Has there been any way that you've actually tried to affect change in diversity, or just in the products that you create or within your company, just in your day-to-day work at all?
Yes.
Yeah, you look very motivated.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
You were like, I'm on it.
Yeah, definitely. I have been, we're doing a pretty large-scale game at this point. That's going to be a 2-year project. Obviously, all under NDA, but I'm helping to write it. And it's been a collaboration of, working with my boss, who is the executive producer of the studio. And we've been writing this game together, which is a very ambitious goal, first off. But, but yeah, working together, and I'll be I don't think we should put this in this children's game. And he'll be are you sure? And I'm yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of that. I mean, I can't really speak in specific of what it is, but we've had some times where things might have not been able to get through with differences in opinions or what they would find acceptable or not acceptable. It happens, but I rather something get changed or not, then I don't know.
Zoe, can you speak to it?
With the little power that I have as a junior character artist, yes, I definitely push for things that I don't know, are, how do I phrase this? Kind of things for everybody. So it's do I want to make that pink? Yes, I want to make that pink. Do I want to incorporate different hair textures into the game to represent different people? Sure, why not? Let's do that. Let's make everything as diverse as possible so we can have I don't know, let's make everybody happy kind of thing. So with that power, yeah, I definitely try and push things towards inclusivity.
Yeah, I think, I just forgot what I was going to say. Yeah.
Do you want to gather?
Yeah, wait 1 second.
Okay, sure.
You're talking about character. Yeah, I lost it. Never mind.
All right. It's okay. I've been doing that all day.
No, it's understandable. It happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. Yeah, because I think that change is really important in the industry, and if we can affect it within, our roles in the industry, it's really, I feel like it's really valuable because it creates the reason for us, to be there. We can actually add our voices to, what those products are, what our consumers want, and to show them that we're out here. So yeah, thank you for all contributing to it in your own way, and I certainly do it as well, but I'm not going to speak to it because I'm just.
I remember what I was going to say.
Also,
oh, you remember? You
yes. No, you go first.
No, I just wanted to input.
Sure.
Also, it's fun. It's better to just why you want to draw the same thing over and over again? Just do something different sometimes,
Yeah, I think especially when you're new, you might feel a little bit intimidated by pointing out things that are pretty obvious to you that, if you saw this in a game, you'd be ooh, that's not good. And if you see that at your studio, I think, know where you stand, but you have to pick your battles. For sure, you can't always get your way, but pointing it out, I think if you do it in a way that isn't calling someone you wrote this because you are a racist, people won't respond well to that, but learn how to diplomatically present your point and show examples of maybe other games that have done this better, and that's something that I'm still working on and learning how to do well. is getting people to see your point, but don't be afraid to like call out that change. I think that's really valuable, and people do value that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when you're younger in the industry, you definitely kind of have a fear of like, making waves or calling things out. But you should, at least like feel some power to, to do that and affect that change, even if you've just started. And even if you don't want to bring it up to like somebody who's like, like a big in the industry, like your boss or whatever, try to find somebody that you trust to actually bring it up to and see, if, what you have to say is valid, and just to have somebody to be a sound piece to validate you. Mm-hmm. And finding that person in the industry, if you can find that somebody is going to be really helpful for anybody who wants to work to affect that change. So yeah, I just wanted to add that because I feel like it is important. And I was like, when I first started in the industry, I was very scared to say anything about things that I saw going on. But it got better as I, became more mature in the industry, and it's continuing to be better, and other people are continuing to be better too. Okay, cool. So I will shift then to how do you? I know like working in art or even being a producer is kind of a sedentary lifestyle. I know we sit in front of a computer all day. We're like kind of like very laser focused. It's a very sedentary lifestyle. How do you keep yourself healthy?
So, I don't see anyone else doing this, but I dance when I draw in my seat. So I mean, it keeps me sane. It keeps everything from being redundant sometimes. I also a lot of people go outside the studio and go to gyms to work out during lunch. Our studio provides programs for mental health. That's extremely important. And I decided to take martial arts. That's been helping, with sitting there with, this tight muscles and stuff. A lot of people don't seem to think, like before they get into the industry, they don't seem to really pay attention to the health part of it, but that is very important. And also, when you get, breaks, sometimes someone's bringing a whole bunch of donuts, you don't always have to eat it.
Oh, really?
I'm still trying to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's a hard one.
Yeah, we have two people who are really good at baking, and they'll bring 100 cupcakes, and that's bad. So don't get into temptation. So.
Zoe, Rachel.
Yeah. I try and bike to work, which if any of you bike in Philadelphia, it's crazy. I always feel like I'm like, am I gonna make it to work today? I don't know. It's so wild here. Biking to work is good. We're over in Old City area, so it's pretty nice. You can just get up and walk around. There's a secret garden around the block from our office, which is that's cool. I should go there. I don't. Taking walks, that would be good. But I try and do a lot of my own cooking. People order out a lot, and I try and limit that to once or twice a week. And then, I could definitely be better about taking care of my physical health. I think, mental health wise, I get really involved in the community. Work does, stress you out, but at the same time, I think doing meaningful work can be really good for your mental health. Doing work that I can see pays off for the people around me, and the kind of work that I know before I got my job and before I was in the industry, I would have needed someone else to be doing it feels good for me. It's really fulfilling. And so even if I'm doing really tedious menial work at work, I have something else bigger that I can look to and say, hey, I'm working towards something larger than myself.
So for myself, I like to take walks every couple of hours, do a couple of laps around the building whenever I'm at work. So I usually walk a few miles every day. What else do I do? I tend to make all my own food, and it's usually focused on like vegetables, fruits, plant-based proteins, that kind of thing. So having a healthy diet is very important if you want to keep yourself healthy. What else? I found wearing sunglasses outside, because if you're staring at a computer screen all day, your eyes will get really photosensitive. And so if you go outside, you might get a headache. That's fun. And then when I'm not at work, I'm either like doing yoga at home, following like a YouTube video, or like just kind of dancing or singing around my apartment, just trying to like get the focus off of like work mode and onto like, I am at home, this is relaxation mode. And I think like another important thing for mental health, especially as someone who wants to do art, is to, I guess, do art that you like to do at home, and make sure that like, a lot of people can get really into doing just art at work, and that can cause burnout, I think. And so just keeping yourself interested in what you do is really beneficial to you.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, because I feel like burnout is a very significant thing when you're working in an industry like this. And I feel like a lot of students tend to wear like, you know, their all-nighters or their like lack of like self-care as a personal badge of honor, but it's not sustainable. Don't do that. Like, don't stay up for 48 hours. It's not a good thing to do. So, because like if you do it, it will burn you out. And have you experienced burnout when you've been working in the industry, and how do you combat that?
I've seen people experience burnout. I've came close to it. Just let your directors know that, look, I'm tired. I need a day of rest or something. Usually they'll compromise with something to help you. They're not all machines. Sometimes some are, but not all of them. But also with burnout, not physical, like mental, just, you know, outside of work, just talk to people, get into extracurricular activities. Just like I myself, I'm taking martial arts. That's helping a lot. I have really bad anxiety. So I do take advantage of what my job offers. Counseling, don't think it's just, you know, something that's, oh, I'm just talking, but it's not going to help. It does help. But sometimes you'll get into a situation that might stress you out. Just, you know, breathe. Sometimes it'll work out in the end. And, I mean, you got not too much to lose. Might as well do it. I mean, so, yeah.
Yeah. I think artistic burnout is a very real thing, especially among students, when like you just have project after project after project and you got to get it all done in order to pass the class. I think once you're kind of out of that mentality, out of like student mode, it can still happen pretty frequently, especially if you're doing art at work and then art at home. So as important as self-study and like doing art is, like especially to young artists like you, taking a break is just as important as self-study. So yeah.
Sometimes you have to scream at yourself to sit down.
Yeah, just like just like stop doing art until like you want to do art again, and even then, like take another week if you can. It's like, I really, really, really want to draw.
Like, you know, just
Yeah.
throw that sketch. Just sit back and marathon Netflix. Maybe.
Yeah, just find something to get inspired by, and then once you're really inspired, I think it's safe to pick it back up again. But breaks are good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my job is really mental. Like, I don't know how to put that, but like, it's a lot about just sitting down and thinking. Like, you just sit and you think, like, what is gonna go wrong today? And then you like write it down in a list, and then that's what you do. But a lot of it is just like remembering things that like someone asked you 5 minutes ago for this, don't forget it. But also someone's asking you for this, and like you just have to, like really prioritize what you're doing. And that can definitely be really tiring. By the end of the day, it's definitely like, I don't want to talk to anyone else. But I definitely have a problem with taking on too much outside of work too. Anyone who knows me knows that, yeah. But to combat that, I think recently I like took a Monday off and I was like, I'm not gonna go to work today. I'm gonna take this day off and just like do nothing. And it felt so good. Like, yeah, I'm lucky that I have like vacation time that I can dedicate to that, which is great. Yeah, like really taking time specifically in your day for yourself is really important. I get caught in that in-between of like, I'm supposed to be working, but I'm not, and I'm not relaxing either. So I think a lot of people do that. I think having time that you're like, okay, I'm gonna work on this until like 10 o'clock, and then once it is 10 o'clock, I'm not going to do any work after that point. Those kind of things have been really helpful for me in avoiding just like sitting after work until I go to bed, just like stressed.
Yeah, I'm actually going to speak to that too because that is so relatable to me. I'm the kind of person who just like wants to always be doing something.
Yeah, same.
And in order to keep myself kind of like inspired and busy after work so that I'm producing my own art, I'll do cons, I'll do freelance, I'll just like, do personal projects like Inktober. And like I realized eventually that I was like, I can't do all of these things all at once. And when I think about all these things that I want to do, and I get overwhelmed by it. And so I'll just sit there and not do any of them and then feel stressed because I'm not doing work. It's a terrible cycle that I've been getting caught into.
I saw this post on Tumblr the other day that someone sent to me, which at first I was a little bit like, thanks. But it was like some people like do, you know the term, but like they do half of the job, right? Like they do it half as well as they could. But like I was never that person. But at the same time, I took on too many things, so I couldn't do as well as I possibly could do. So there's like, you do it like 3/4 of the way. And that's like how I've done everything in my life. And I'm like, oh no. Like if I took on less things, I could do them so much better. And I think that's gonna be my goal for the coming year. But yeah, like I don't fail at things, but they're not as good as they could be if I just gave them the time that they deserved.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, I think it's really about giving yourself the space to just like be. Like what I've started to resolve myself to do is to give myself Mondays and Fridays off specifically so that I don't allow myself to touch freelance. I don't allow myself to touch like whatever projects. If it's something that's fun, I'll do it. But for the most part, I'll just keep Mondays and Fridays booked that's me time. I get to do whatever I want to do because that way it gets me to compartmentalize the things that I have to do. It gets me to actually focus when those days come, when Tuesdays through Thursdays come, so I can actually like do the work and do it well. Mm-hmm. And it gives me a chance to just relax and, play video games and not feel guilty about it. So yeah, scheduling is definitely good. What would your advice be to like students getting out of the industry in that regard, or getting out of school in that regard about like, keeping, like maintaining their sanity and like inspiration, I think too, because I feel like a lot of artists, since like we're working in the industry, it can be stressful and constantly doing art over and over again can kind of like burn out your creativity. How do you keep your creativity up? I know we had talked about a lot of this already, but if there's anything else that you want to add to it.
Yeah, we kind of talked about it.
I mean, I feed a lot off of other people. Like I get really excited about things that other people are excited about.
Yeah.
So that's why being part of a community is really important for me. Like even though I am like really an introvert, I get really exhausted hanging out with people or talking to people. I like really need alone time. I need to force myself to go out on like Thursday nights, plug, when we have Philly Game Mechanics meetings, which you should all come to. And we'll do like events where right now we're doing a 2-week game jam. And I have this project that I'm like so excited about, but half of the reason I'm so excited about it is because the people that I'm working with are so excited about it. And like that is the kind of stuff that gets me like really pumped about what I'm doing.
Anybody else have anything to add, or are you good? Okay, cool. That's fine. Okay, so with anybody, okay, we are coming up to the end, so let's close it out with what advice would you give students graduating and get in terms of getting into the industry in the first place? Like, what do you think studios want to see from them the most?
I definitely communicate and get involved with events. If there's like such as this, even if it's like out of your way, if you just show up, talk to guests, that helps. At least get a name out there. Showing off your portfolio, emails, just keep track with studios to see who's hiring, and just stay in communication, really. Always work on your art, improve it. If there's critiques, take those critiques, take in consideration or work on those. Basically just keep going at it. So never give up.
Yeah, I'd say the most important thing as like an artist who wants to work in like the games or animation industry is that unless you're like working in an indie studio that's comprised of like you and like one other person, even then you still have to be a team player. And I think that's the most important aspect of this industry is you have to get along with other people. Basically, don't be a jerk. Seems to be like a common thing among supervisors I've had. This is what they keep saying to me. Not to me, but yeah, please stop. But yeah, I think getting along with other people, showing that you can work with others, and showing that you can grow as an artist as well is really important. I think having some growth in your portfolio when you apply to studios is a really good thing to have, especially as like a junior position or something else, I guess. I guess like one other thing to keep in mind is that when you go out and you apply for these jobs, you're not necessarily competing with other students, you're competing with professionals in the industry. And so you want to show that like you're able to learn, you're able to grow as an artist, and you want to be able to show potential. So yeah,
I really do think the team player one is extremely important, because news spreads fast. If people in the industry find out that you are a jerk, it will pass along, and people do not want to deal with that. Mm-hmm. You might see on TV like people who are like egotistical or just being to each other just to get up there. No, it's not really always like that. If you can't like work with others, there's nothing getting done. You'll cause stress for your other teammates, and it shows into the work that you put in. So keep that in mind. And I know with a lot of artists, we tend to want to keep to ourselves, but you really do have to know how to communicate.
Yeah, I think what really prepared me for working in the game industry was doing it, like doing as much work that is relevant to what you want to be doing as possible. So if you want to be making characters, you should make characters. Like, if you have to do a class for making backgrounds, do it, get good at it. But if you have free time, like, don't waste your time trying to get good at things that you aren't passionate about, when like you should try and find your niche. And as a producer who works with artists, I think the most important thing that I've seen as far as like success of an artist is being willing to, as you said, grow, like taking feedback. People are generally very, very bad at taking feedback. There's a really good book that I just read called Thanks for the Feedback, and I would encourage people to read that book. I think it's really helpful in being able to separate your own identity from feedback people are giving to you, which is something that I had a lot of trouble with. as someone who, like, in school, people were like, you're great, you're doing a great job. And I never had to take people, like, high school is, like, easy, right? It's like, I mean, but if you do the thing, you get an A, right? If you get an A, you're never getting that feedback loop of people telling you, like, hey, this is what you can do better, you know? And I think for me, that was a really important hurdle to get over. Yeah, but get involved in your community. That's how we hire, is the people who come to community events. We know their name. We know that we like them. We know that if we give them feedback, they're not going to cry and, like, scream and be really, really upset. And, you know, get your work out there. We definitely look at, like, resumes are secondary to work. It's really important, especially in this industry and, like, a lot of entertainment industries. I think it's really important to just prove that you can do a job well. It's not necessarily where you went to school or what, you know, what awards you've gotten. It's just whether you fit what the studio needs or not.
All right. That's awesome. So I think we're about out of time. So thank you to the panelists. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Yeah, so if you guys have any burning questions for our panelists, we will have a reception right outside the double doors. There's free food and some free drinks. Feel free to enjoy as much as you like. I would ask that the students don't rush the stage to ask questions. Wait until the panelists get outside so they can get some free food too. And another round of applause for our